Good morning, 5th grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our novel, Esperanza Rising. Before we get started, we have a fill-in-the-blank summary. It says, Old Tallow holds Omachias and her family with respect. Living in a pack of angry and sometimes vicious dogs, Omachias must approach Old Tallow's house with care. Old Tallow gives Omachias both the scissors and a piece of maple sugar candy. On her way home, Omachias debates what to do with the candy and decides to keep it for herself. She thinks about her hurt and anger at being laughed at by Angeline. It becomes clear that Omachias longs for her sister's love and respect. As she reflects, her walk is interrupted by a pair of bear cubs. At first afraid, she later goes against what she has been taught to stay away from bear cubs, as Mama Bear is surely nearby. Omachias offers them berries, and they overcome their wariness of her. She imagines the respect Angeline will have for her if she comes back with her new friends. At that point, Omachias finds herself pinned to the ground by an angry mother bear. Omachias realizes her only hope of staying alive is to remain still and apologize to the mother bear. The bear realizes Omachias will not hurt her cubs and lets her go. Omachias feels the loss of her new brothers, and something has changed. Press pause to write down your answers and play when you're ready for the focus question. Our focus question says, what do the Ojibwa people believe about nature? How do they demonstrate these beliefs in daily life and religious practice? Our vocabulary words for today are harmony, and that's the quality of forming a pleasing and consistent whole and agreement. These people are all living in harmony. 2 is communal, and that represents something that is shared or for common use. Everyone can use it. It's communal. And 3 is personal. Something is personal, only you can use it. It's just about you. Go ahead and turn the page and open up your book to page 33. We're going to read the first part of chapter 3, and we're going to think about how her experience with the bear has changed Omachias. We're going to use our CSPS strategy. After she returned with the scissors, Omachias quietly took up the deer bone from her mother's skin bag and began working on the moose hide without being asked. Her mother looked at her in some surprise, but said nothing. Angeline said that she had meant to do the work, but Omachias merely shook her head. Go for a swim, she told her sister. See what the waves brought up to the shore last night. Catch some crayfish. Asha'agashin. Watch out for their claws. I don't mind helping. Angeline and Mama looked at Omachias as though they couldn't have heard right. But when Omachias nodded to signal that she meant what she said, and Mama nodded, Angeline started with delight. She had to do grown-up work now every day, and she rarely had free time to play. Angeline looked hopefully at her mother, who waved her out towards the lake shore. Off she ran, skipping and bounding in her thin summer moccasins, her soft old trade-cloth dress fluttering. Baby Niwu was sleeping in his tickanagun. Little Brother Pinch was killing his willow doll men over and over on a rock. Omachias concentrated now on the work beneath her hands. She needed to think about what had just happened to her. Boring work was just what she wanted. Her mind could wander. She sighed, irritated by the smell and buzzing flies. At least there was some breeze that day to blow away the smell. While scraping the hide, she let her thoughts roam. The longer she thought about her encounter with the mother bear, the more Omachias was convinced that something she did not understand had passed between the two of them. Not words. Perhaps they had communicated by smells, or maybe in a language of feelings. Her terror, the bear's pity. Perhaps it was her own grandmother's advice that had saved her life. Nokomis had told her that the bear must be addressed with the greatest respect, as a treasured relative, that the bear had human qualities and nobody quite understood the bear, but that bears understood humans quite well. We'll stop right there because we have information about our character and setting. In box 1, we would write, Omachias wanted to work on the moose hide so that she could process her near-death experience with the bear. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. You would write down this quote on page 34. She needed to think about what had just happened to her. Boring work was just what she wanted. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the setting. And for the setting, we would go back to page 33, and in box 2, we would write, Omachias returned home and began working on the moose hide. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this first sentence on page 33. After she returned with the scissors, Omachias quietly took up the deer bone from her mother's skin bag and began working on the moose hide without being asked. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're in the middle we're at the top of page 35, and we're listening for the problem. When a bear was killed and its skin was off, Omachias knew it looked fearfully like a person. She'd also heard that bears laugh and cry, just as humans do. Grandma had once seen a bear rocking its young in her arms, just as a human mother rocks its young. Nobody on the island ever tossed the bones of a bear aside. Every bear bone was gathered respectfully and buried all together. At a bear feast, the bear's skull was ribboned and set out on a good red cloth, spoken to, honored. Yes, there was something about what happened that made Omachias very quiet. As she scraped at the hide, nicking bits of meat and gristle from the surface, she began to get all empty and peculiar and faint inside. A thought was coming. A voice approached. This happened to her sometimes. A dizzy feeling would pass over her. If she attended to it closely, once it was gone, she would know something a little extra, as though she'd overheard two spirits talking. We'll stop right there because we have some information about Omachias' problem. In box 3, we would write, Omachias cannot figure out what exchange happened between her and the bear. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. You would write down this quote on page 35. Yes, there was something about what had happened that made Omachias very quiet. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the bottom of page 35. She kept scraping, gritting her teeth, and held on to her thoughts. For once again she could feel the presence of a powerful mother bear at her shoulder. Although there were no words, and although there was no odor of her presence, no bear sounds, no tracks, Omachias' heart lightened. Turning from her work, she knew the bear had visited her. She knew the bear had followed her home. She knew that when she needed the bear, she would be able to call on the bear. The bear had understood something she had said, and she had understood something the bear had thought, and although she couldn't tell exactly what, Omachias turned back to her task with her head clear and her hands cheerful. She worked so hard all through that afternoon that her grandma, watching her keenly, made a great fuss over the work Omachias had done on the hide. She said Omachias had done as well as a full-grown woman. Her mother promised her a very special pair of winter moccasins, and Angeline even braided her hair with one of her very own red ribbons. We'll stop right there because we have information about the solution. In box 4 we would write, as Omachias is tanning the moose hide, she feels the presence of the bear and her thoughts become clearer. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. We would write down this quote on page 36. And although she couldn't tell exactly what, Omachias turned back to her task with her head clear and her hands cheerful. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, describe Omachias. What kind of person is she and how do you know?